Alrighty. This is part 2 of our week 2 lecture. We're now moving into platform affordances. So, when we think about the platforms that we have just been discussing, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, WordPress, it's really important to sort of think about both the way that people use the platform and also the way that the platform owners design the platform and want us to use the platform. And the other thing that's really important to remember is that the way that people who build the platform want us to use the platform and the way that we actually use the platform, us users, it doesn't necessarily always match. There is sometimes a little bit of a difference between the way that platforms are intended to be used and the way that we, the users, actually use them. Sometimes it's not kind of huge and revolutionary. Sometimes it's just small and it can make a really big impact. A really good example of this is the way that we understand the hashtag on Twitter. So the hashtag was invented on Twitter. It was developed in 2009 by a man called Chris Messina. It was just a couple of years after Twitter launched. Twitter launched in 2007. And it was designed as a way of hyperlinking content for easy navigation around the platform. One of the problems with the platform was that everything was kind of mixed in together and it was really, really hard to find stuff and classify stuff and different bits of content. So putting a hash in front of a word would make that an active hyperlink, and then you could click on that hashtag, and find all of the tweets that also use that hashtag. So then content would then be grouped and classified around these hashtags as kind of, they weren't really called that back then, but that's what they came to be known as. So you can also search a hashtag or you can click on a hashtag and find things. And it was built by a person who was working at Twitter, a Twitter developer, but it wasn't kind of roundly supported. No one really thought this was going to be a really big thing at the platform, the people who were programming the platform. They didn't think that this was necessary and they didn't think that it was particularly helpful, but they went ahead with this kind of hashtag feature and the users really loved it. And the users have made the hashtag what it is today. It's kind of gone beyond Twitter and is now on other platforms, but it was really the users taking hold of this kind of function and using that again and again and again, and sort of, using it, I suppose, is the way it was intended to be used, but it was never really fully supported until users became very passionate about it. I think that, not to kind of, labor the point on hashtags and their importance, but this sort of very humble functionality of hyperlinking, which is a very common thing online, but wasn't common on the platform, has really inspired so many other things. So if we think about the way that we understand trending topics on things like Twitter or Instagram or even Facebook, that comes from the hashtag. And then it also has been used by a lot of activist groups to amplify messages, to group messages, to show how many people are tweeting out about a particular phenomenon. And we now use the word hashtag, to classify particular social movements. Hashtag Me Too, hashtag Yes All Women, hashtag Oscars So White, hashtag Inclusion Writer. These are all hashtags that have been trending on platforms, and kind of we understand them as sort of hashtag activism and hashtag movements because of the way that they enable us to classify and group and search tweets. The use of hashtags on Facebook has a really strange and challenging life, and the platform has really struggled to make them work. And that's because the sort of purpose of the hashtag and where it was designed within a platform like Twitter, which is very open and there's very few sort of privacy issues, or there's so many privacy issues, but very few private accounts. That's very different to the structure and the purpose of Facebook, because people have different levels of privacy and access to their accounts. You really can't capture all of the conversations about, say, Oscars so white on Facebook by searching through a hashtag, because it just cannot capture it because of the different permissions. But on a platform like Twitter, you really can get a really full picture of who is talking about a particular movement. So when we think about that kind of relationship, that push and pull relationship between the platform rules, the sort of conventions of the platform as prescribed by the people who built the platform, and the way that users have adopted the platform and made it their own and use it in a particular way, we can really see the way that genre conventions on digital platforms are the result of a complex and ongoing interplay between what a platform enables and how users respond. So technological functions and layouts are really what we understand to be governed by the platform's interface. So what we as the users see and what we can and can't do. So can we share something? Can we comment on it? Can we react in some way? Can we add images? Can we add links, videos, GIFs, and all that kind of that stuff? So on Twitter, that would be the length of the post you can write. On Instagram, it can sort of be the fact that you can't really have hyperlinks within to outside content within an Instagram post, and sharing Instagram posts within the grid is actually very, very difficult. So we kind of are really limited by the way that the platforms are constructed. However, users can kind of find new ways to respond and incorporate conventions into their usage, and then change the way that the platforms kind of exist. So you know, the way you can kind of regram, that's a third-party app can come in and regram an Instagram post. So my Instagram post can be regrammed onto your grid, for instance. Also the use of reaction buttons on Facebook is another really good example of this. There used to only be a like button, a like, comment, and share, and there was repeated calls for a dislike button. That wasn't introduced, but the ability to react in different ways and use different emotions to react, you know, happy, laughing, sad, angry, you know, love heart, all of those were introduced because that's what people wanted from the platform. I think the calls for that really kind of were grounded in the fact that if somebody on Facebook posted, they posted really sad news, people were liking that news as a show of support, but it felt really kind of icky, you know, liking a thing that was really negative. And so the ability to kind of have more sophisticated reactions was introduced. But it's not just kind of the way that we kind of move around platforms and the kind of structured conventions of platforms that have changed, you know, whether or not we can like or heart or fave or love or whatever. The content that we actually post has also changed over time. I'm not quite sure why or how or what's kind of precipitated this. I think it is about kind of the growing dominance of platforms. The relationship between platforms and media makers and users has really evolved, especially on a platform like Facebook. But if we look at the fact that Facebook, when they first launched globally, it was really a place where people kind of updated their friends on really mundane aspects of their lives. You know, what you ate for breakfast or what you were kind of eating for dinner. There was a lot of kind of food posts and what people were eating. And you know, I just sent my car to the garage, or I just bought a new pair of shoes, or anything, very, very mundane updates of your life. Now, the majority of content on Facebook is posted by organizations and pages. So more kind of professional facing content producers and newsmakers. So the kind of way that the platform is used and the way that users kind of interact with the platform and what they post has evolved over time. And then we can see, when we talk about the kind of interfaces and the way that they've changed over time, it's also really important to think about kind of the technological capabilities of different platforms. And YouTube is a really interesting example of this. So if we look at YouTube circa 2005, we can see what the platform looked like before. And it was hugely sophisticated when it was launched. But if we look at YouTube circa 2020, 15 years later, we can see that the platform looks very different, and the I think it's more attractive, but maybe that's because that's what I'm kind of used to. But also it's changed based on so many things, including the ability of the platform itself to learn, and the algorithm to learn our viewing habits and serve us content in that, you know, is stuff that we want to see. And the kind of capabilities of the kind of design have also evolved. So we also see the way that the content has changed over time. So in 2005, the majority of content on YouTube came from user-generated content. And it was stuff that people were making themselves, and remixing and reposting and doing fun stuff themselves, users, just amateur users on YouTube. But now we can see, if we look at the comparison between these two screenshots of YouTube, a lot of these are coming from professional and news organizations or media organizations. We have movie trailers, and we have like a lot of sports broadcasting and news broadcasting on YouTube. And you are seeing an evolution in the people who are actually posting on YouTube, and the kind of dominance of larger organizations. Much more professional content, more organized. It mimics television much more closely than it did back in 2005. And so just like the printing press allowed for the proliferation of books and the development of different genres, the affordances of technology shape the development of digital genres. So we are always understanding digital genre to be shaped by the kind of push and pull between the platform themselves and the development of the platforms and the way that users are using these platforms. If we think about the different social media platforms and their individual genre conventions, we can begin to see the ways in which the affordances of the platform influences both the kind of content posted and the style of that content. And then the thing that kind of comes into this discussion is, what about blogs, and where do they fit? Because they're much less structured, and they're much more free-flowing, and they're much more decentralized than a platform like YouTube or a platform like Instagram. So in the third part of our lecture, I'm going to discuss the genre conventions of blogs. So stay tuned.